The Text Collector is the newest project from Halifax-based multidisciplinary artist Leanne Hoffman. The songwriter, poet, and visual artist's sophomore album was released in June of this year, along with her first self-published book by the same name. The book contains the 365 poems written over the course of a year that became the songs on The Text Collector. Produced by award-winning producer Aaron Costello and Hoffman herself, the album deconstructs poetry and pop music, rebuilding the pieces into a listening experience even richer than the sum of its parts. With the swirling melodies and glitzed-up production of Top 40, Leanne builds tension between soundscapes primed for pure pleasure and lyrics that address the interconnected relationship between desire and despair. Paired with 4 videos and 8 handmade art pieces, The Text Collector is a multimedia art project representing 365 days of introspection. You can find the album, the book, and the visuals for The Text Collector through her website, leannehoffman.com, and on her Instagram, HMLeanne. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Songwriter's Piano, an easy-to-use app for songwriters and lyricists to use when coming up with song ideas when there's no instrument around or nobody to play one. With the Songwriter's Piano, one can easily play commonly used pop songwriting chord sequences at the touch of a screen, in any key, in 3 different chord variations, all played on a gorgeously recorded grand piano. Download the Songwriter's Piano by Play Like Me apps today, found on both iOS and Android stores everywhere. Welcome to Women in the Music Industry, the podcast that shines a spotlight on the remarkable women who are breaking barriers and making their mark in an industry that has long been dominated by men. I'm your host, Rob Wells, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on this empowering journey. Each episode of this podcast will be dedicated to exploring the inspiring stories, accomplishments, and struggles of the extraordinary women who have defied the odds and made waves in the music business. Together, we'll delve into the journeys of female artists, songwriters, producers, musicians, managers, executives, and all those who have helped play a pivotal role behind the scenes. We'll uncover the stories that deserve to be heard, as well as celebrate the triumphs, challenges, and unique perspectives that women bring to the music industry. Whether you're a fan of music, an aspiring artist, or simply curious about the inner workings of the music business, this podcast will offer a valuable perspective. Together, we'll celebrate the power of music and the strength of these inspiring women. So join us as we amplify their voices and together pave the way for a future where women in the music business are no longer the exception, but the rule. Welcome everyone to another episode of Women in the Music Industry. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome to the show. For those of you who have been here before, welcome back. Our next guest is a Juno Award-winning R&B soul artist and rapper. Q Benjamin, also known as Q, has been kicking it hard since 2008, where she entered a singing competition called The Bounce Showdown, held by a contemporary hit radio station called 91.7 The Bounce in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. She became the 4th winner of that competition, getting her signed with Vancouver-based Hip Joint Productions. Q recorded 2 songs in 2008, Cover Girls and Get Loose. Cover Girls would get licensed for use on the sitcom The Kink in My Hair and a music video. In 2009, she released Someday and DNG. Someday was used in the sitcom Gigantic. Also in 2009, a Get Loose remix was featured in the American Pie Presents The Book of Love comedy film. Her single, Stars, won a Juno Award for R&B Soul Recording of the Year. Holy smokes. With her unrelenting force of nature, Q has been releasing new music faster than I can say those words, such as Come Through, TMS, New Ting, 2020 Vision, Somebody's Son, and Mic Drop. A recent post on Instagram, which is found at It's Q Benjamin, showed her hard at work in the studio yet again. So I just know that new music is right around the corner. She is truly unstoppable. Q is also a gender and women's studies scholar, a marketing consultant, a speaker, and a faith advocate. Everyone, please give it up for the one and only Q Benjamin. Yeah.
That is quite the introduction. Thank you so much for having me, Rob.
You are quite the individual, and I'm so happy that you're here. This is great. It's
Glad
been a long, you and I both know so many people in common, and yet we have never met face to face.
I know, but here we are. So it was bound to happen, and I'm glad that today's the day.
Yeah, cool. Can I ask where in the world are you roughly? You don't have to give me the specific address, but just
Oh, well, thank you for saying that because I'm a pretty specific person. I probably would have been like, would you like the postal code too?
right.
I am currently in Calgary, Alberta right now.
I love Calgary. It's
Yes.
a great city.
Have you been?
Oh, many times. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a bit of a country girl myself, so I love all genres of music, including country. So it's been really fun
I
living.
love Alberta, and actually, it is my whole family knows that when I leave this rock, I would like my ashes to be spread up in the grassy lakes, which is right near Canmore, Alberta.
Okay. Yeah.
It's a really beautiful spot. I just love that whole world, that whole country, and we go out to Alberta all the time for vacation, and it's just a lovely spot. You're originally from Edmonton?
Edmonton. I'm originally from Edmonton, but I always say I'm an E-Town chick, but I'm Calgary rowdy.
That's amazing. I love it. How long did you live in Edmonton for?
So I was born and raised in Edmonton. I moved to Toronto in 2011, I think, and I lived there until 2016. And that's when I moved back to Edmonton, and I was in Edmonton for about a year to 2 years. And then I moved to Calgary 2018, 2019.
Cool. And what was the reason for going to Calgary?
To be honest with you, I think I just needed a change. I'm a very adventurous person. I like to try new things. I like to experience different things. And having lived in Toronto, I think it's just being exposed to that bigger city vibe. It felt a little bit quiet in Edmonton. And then everything had changed because I was gone from home for 5 years, right? So I just thought, I have an aunt that lives in Calgary. Why not check it out? And I did for a year. And then COVID happened and a year became 2 to 3 years. And now I'm just here and I enjoy it. I quite enjoy it.
And the best thing about being in Calgary is that you are only just 2-3 hours away from Edmonton if you change your mind.
Yeah, boundaries are important, right? So no, you can never be too close to family.
What's that main pit stop in between Edmonton and Calgary? Is it Red Deer that everyone stops at for gas?
Yeah, it's Red Deer, but I try not to stop.
Right. Fill up enough so that you can just bypass it.
Go.
Right.
I'm not that patient.
The nice thing about Calgary compared to Edmonton is that you are that much closer to the Rockies. You can be there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I've been a couple times. When I lived in Edmonton, I didn't go out to the Rockies a lot. But I've been a couple times now. It's a nice little day trip. So
yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. Okay. So part of this podcast is definitely, I want to know your whole story. Like I read your version of your life just in the bio there, but I'd love to know more of a deeper dive into your beginning years. I want to know how music entered your life. Just if you could take me way back. Well, not too far back because you're still super young, but just you know what I mean.
Sure. So I think for me, I'm biracial. So I'm Canadian, grew up in Edmonton, born in Edmonton, Canadian 100%. But my background is Pakistani and Jamaican. So with that came exposure to a lot of different genres of music. So dancehall, Bhangra music. And I know you have 2 biracial children as well.
All my kids are biracial, actually.
Yeah. I love that. So you know a little bit what it's like, a little bit about what it's like. And I think the coolest thing about that is just the exposure to culture, the exposure to music, and being able to kind of, as a mixed person, cherry pick what about what you're exposed to you prefer and what you like the most, even parts of culture, right? So I think growing up, I was exposed to a lot of hip hop, a lot of R&B, pop music. Growing up in the 90s was, going to school in Edmonton, it was a lot of dance music, and like 90s dance was amazing, like the Aqua type of stuff. And my aunt loved dance music and like the Spice Girls. And then I loved the Backstreet Boys. But then on, also in my family, they loved hip hop. My uncle was a DJ, so he had like a huge stack of CDs that became mine eventually. So I think I've just been a real student of music, and it happened quite accidentally. I also grew up, because I'm half Jamaican, with dancehall music, a lot of island music, soca, and that type of influence as well. So a lot of culture. And I think that all of it together really influenced my artistic perspective and how I write, how I express myself, and then just also what I related to. And I always say, I think music is seasonal as well. So, when I'm in a great mood, this is kind of what I lean to. It's more of like the dance hall, soca. And then I also have a country ear too, because my mom used to block much music because I wasn't allowed to watch it as a kid. But because we had cable and I loved music, I would just like go look for music, and it was CMT. So I really just grew an ear for country music that way, because I would just watch CMT sometimes for hours, and it would be like Carrie Underwood, Shania Twain, and just different artists that I really enjoyed. So yeah, that was kind of how I started with music. I loved to read and I loved to write. And I think they just kind of went hand in hand. There was just something very special about listening to music. It was like something came on for me, whether I was watching a music video, there was just something that activated. And it's hard to explain or articulate, because it's more of like a soul moving, right? But there was a fascination that I had, and an immersement into the artistry of music and dance and performance. And I think, that was kind of how I started, and being exposed to music. And then because I love to read and write, I would start to write a lot, whether it was poetry or songs, jingles, that type of thing. And that really began to kind of shape who I was artistically. And I think the cherry on top of the cake was in junior high, I joined the cheer team. So I was a cheerleader, and I had always done sports. So it was always basketball. So grade 7 and 8, I played basketball. And in grade 9, I was like, that looks fun and cool because the girls look cute and they're dancing. So maybe I can try out for the team. So I tried out for the team, nailed the audition. And I remember my very first cheer competition. Again, it was like that same soul moving feeling where it's like something just turned on for me. And I had never had any dance experience or anything at the time, but I remember my cheer coaches putting me front and center for the dance sequence. So it was just ever since then, I think that was like the red flag or the green flag that, okay, something is here. There's something here that I'm meant for, and that I really love and that I'm passionate about, and I didn't even know it. So from there, I think that was when things really started to kind of take shape for me, even before joining any competitions or taking any chances with music professionally.
Wow. Were you singing a lot? Did you have any exposure to anybody singing around you, or joining any choirs or anything like that? How did the whole singing?
I did. So I sang a little bit at church, and choirs at church as well. My mom was a singer growing up. So again, like even that was just something that I was always exposed to. She was also in studios a lot. My grandpa's actually a composer. So he's from Pakistan, and he basically composes music in Urdu, and that's the language that they speak in Pakistan. Yeah. So like it was everywhere for me. And I think, for me, that was kind of, I dabbled. I remember singing, like writing really silly songs when I was like 8, just at like Superstore, we'd be bagging groceries. And I was like, here's my pen and pad. What do you think about this jingle, Grandma? So yeah, I had exposure to that stuff too, but it's like, it was silly stuff, like when you start out and you're a kid and you don't have life experience, it's kind of just like, we're just having fun. And unbeknownst to me, it ended up like shaping my music career and my gifts and my talents.
We are so lucky that we grew up in an era where there were music videos nonstop happening.
Yes.
I too was banned from watching music videos. My mother would see some music videos and she'd say, "That's it. Robbie's not watching any music videos." And I made my case for it. I said, "But I'm learning so much from this. I'm seeing musical performances. I'm seeing the way the bands react to each other. All these different styles of music. I'm getting inspired." I said, "Mom, can you just sit down with me for half an hour and we'll watch?" half an hour of music so I can prove my case. And she said, okay, fine, I'll sit down. And the first video that came on was the worst. It was the worst video that I ever could have shown. It was Kiss Lick It Up. The song was called.
Oh no.
Yes. And my mom said, that's it. I knew I was right. And then I was banned from watching any music videos. Of course, she had no idea how to block it. So my brother and I we found a way to watch music videos. But it is such an educator though. And still to this day, I'm still inspired by watching music videos. And I think it's part of who I became. And I like to make music videos now as well. And you can learn so much by just, getting up that close and personal to the artists and seeing how they do things.
You can. And, I think for better or for worse, right? Like, I think as an adult, I've been kind of charged with the responsibility of sorting through a lot of the messaging that I saw, and even sometimes just not really understanding what it meant, or even sometimes, and what that meant for me artistically as well, right? Sometimes you to whom much is given, much is required. And when you are an artist and you have a platform and you have influence, I think there is some level of responsibility that you need to have. And I know this is like really, it's a controversial thing in the artist community, but I think, there's a point where I think you do have to mature and kind of take accountability for what message that you're sending out. And I think we've all kind of been an audience to music and messaging sometimes that we weren't quite 100% sure what it meant or the impact that it could have, whether negative or positive. But I think we all reach a point where we are capable of sorting through that messaging and then also filtering through the messaging we put out as artists as well. So I think for better or worse, it did really shape me, even from hip hop to R&B to those videos. And it's not a secret that there's a lot of negativity in hip hop. There's a lot of positivity too, but a lot of the stuff that I listened to and was sorting through, there's a lot of cursing and a lot of, aggressive messaging, hypersexualization in terms of women. And I can't lie and say that those things didn't impact my music career or my artistry or my perspective even, right? But I think that part of it is learning and growing through that and just taking a mature perspective and looking at, okay, how did these things really impact me, and were they positive or negative? I think that's an important conversation to have with oneself and your audience as well.
Oh, for sure. For sure. It's one of my mandates for sure when I produce and when I write music is I'm thinking, is this going to help anybody? Or is this going to put somebody further down the spiral? And I'm always about how can I help people? How can I help my fellow human being have a better experience after they've listened to this song or seen this video?
And that's so responsible, right? And I think sometimes we are guilty as artists of just expressing without also carrying that responsibility oftentimes. And I think that that's something I've really been more mindful of artistically is how can I be more responsible with the messaging? What message is this sending? And is it really true to my values? And I think, I've spent a lot of time outside of music sorting through what are my values? What do I believe in? And who am I as a person? What do I value as a person? Because I think that creating art and music, it should be in line with that, right? It shouldn't just always be emotional and reactive, right? So.
Absolutely. Well, it's important, when I speak to artists and they're talking about their career and maybe it hasn't taken off yet, and they're thinking about, what should I be writing about? What should I be talking about? And really, it's just like, what is in your heart? What do you really feel? Because if something takes off that you're creating right now, and it becomes huge, this is the thing that you're going to be performing for the rest of your life.
Right.
So it really should be something that is in line with your core beliefs, your values, and just something that you really feel proud to stand up on a stage night after night after night and perform. I think
that's such great advice. That it's really great advice, but also that's one of the hardest things about being an artist too, is things do live with you forever sometimes. And I think that's the plight of anybody in this digital age right now, right? I mean, when you're growing and you're learning and you're young and you're what I felt 10 years ago and who I was 10 years ago, it's not who I am now, right? My very first single, Cover Girls, I remember just it was just something that stuck with me for a really long time. And being somebody who grew up more hip hop and R&B, it was really hard to perform a track like that for such a long time, right? And I feel like people kind of branded me off that. And, being biracial and growing up in a certain way, it was it almost kind of was I felt like it almost was speaking for me in ways that wasn't necessarily accurate to my identity, right? So it's like it's great advice, but I think that is something that also like we struggle with artistically too, because as much as that's great advice, sometimes what we do on an industry level is, okay, what is going to make the most impact and how do you make it sound the most relatable to people to get the message across, right? And sometimes that's not always something that speaks to your heart every time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that you also have to learn with age too, I find.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the music that I was making back in the late 90s, and it sounds very much unlike what I love, like I was just really just trying to chase the charts. I was trying to, I think that it took time for me to actually stop and just think, no, hold on. I need to create the music that I really love myself. And I need to chase my heart instead of chasing the charts.
And I think that's when the magic comes too, right? Or even when you can meet somewhere in the middle where it's like, okay, the charts are there and you know now what is on the charts and what actually works, but how do you make this authentic to you? And that's always been something that I have been chasing, I think, since the beginning of my artistic career, because I did start making pop music and I like pop music, but I think initially early on, I didn't want to only make pop music, or I wanted it to be like R&B pop, right? So it's something that I definitely myself had to grow through as well. But it is something that comes with age. And I think it comes with, and maybe not so much age, but like artistic maturity too, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So can I go back to 2008 and talk to you about, I'd love to know, like just this, I knew about the Bounce Showdown. I knew, cause there were a couple of other artists that went through that I ended up working with. One of them was an artist named Shiloh, still is an artist named Shiloh.
Nice. Yeah.
And so you heard about this competition and you were just thinking, yeah, this is the right time for me to jump into this. Were you still in high school at this point?
I was in high school and I was actually going from one high school to another high school because I didn't like that high school. Okay. So I was moving high schools. And in that summer was the competition, and it was in June. And I remember that because my birthday's in June. So yeah, that was it. And I think somebody told me like, hey, you should try out for this singing competition. And I was like, and I didn't, I think I was like, it was one of those things where I was on the fence. I kind of was thinking like I could, but do I want to? And I just thought like, let's just wing it. Let's see, like, what's the worst that could happen? It's just an experience. And then it's hilarious. I ended up winning. So
that's amazing to just winging it. And then you end up winning. That's great.
Because I didn't have really any expectations per se. I think it was just like, let's just see how it goes. I don't know. I think there's more to, it was a situation where I kind of just thought there's more to win or gain than there is to lose. So why not?
How did it work? Was it a live performance contest or?
It was a live performance. So there was rounds. So basically there was one round the first day, and then they gave us like the finalists of the competition that evening, and then we came back the next day, and then the winner was announced after the finalists that day. So it was like a 2-day competition. And yeah, like I think it was insane because I kind of just like last minute picked my songs. I didn't really have time to practice. It was just like a really busy time too in my life as well, and pretty stressful, I remember it being. So it was one of those situations where I just kind of slapped it together and I just winged it. And I think, it kind of just goes back to me saying the penchant that I've always had for performing since cheerleading days in grade 9. It's just something that turns on and came naturally. And I think that once I was in a position to kind of nurture that, things kind of snowballed.
What's great about getting in front of a crowd like that, with cheerleading or performing at church or things like that, is just it gets you used to being in front of a crowd. So that it does
a big crowd too.
That's true. It could be weird for somebody first time getting up in front of a crowd and seeing all these faces just looking at you. But I know for sure, like for me, I have no problem walking in front of 80,000 people. And I have done that just because I mastered getting in front of 600 people in front of my dad's church. Just being there and just seeing what that feels like to have people facing. So
what kind of church was it?
Oh, my dad was a United Church minister.
No way. My grandpa's a minister. Yeah. I feel like this is like the normal kind of path that we take. And that's why it's so hard for us as artists when we're kids, because our parents are usually like, no, like this is the enemy's music. Especially coming up in like rap and R&B and stuff too. And it's just like,
My grandmother had a great story with the enemy's music.
Really?
Oh yeah, because she grew up in Newfoundland, and her mother was very much against my grandmother playing multiple instruments, which she did. Right. She could play anything. She played organ, she played piano, she played guitar, and then she played harmonica. And the harmonica was like a huge no-no to my great grandmother. So she would take the harmonica from my grandmother and throw it into the ocean. And a day later, my grandmother would take a boat out into the ocean and just be looking down at the rocks and would see a little gleam, something shining down there. And she would dive into the ocean and go get it and pull it out and then go run into the forest and keep playing her harmonica until she got caught again. And then it would get thrown into the ocean again. It was just a continuous cycle of her doing this. But that was the enemy's music back then.
Yeah, that's so sweet. But you know what? And like, I think that is also like a traditional thing too, that I think sometimes like as artists that grew up in a believing family, that's something to combat as well. And I think that's worth being talked about too, because I think a lot of us go through that, right? Oh, yeah. Do you still consider yourself a man of faith now? Do you have faith now?
Well, I am open to so many different things. I grew up in the church. I went to church every Sunday. I performed in choirs and did that. Here's the thing. My mother is also a preacher's kid. And so I'm a preacher's kid. My mother's a preacher's kid. And
my mom is, but I'm the preacher's grandkid. So.
There you go.
I always joke around. I'm like, yeah, my grandpa's a pastor. That's why I'm an asshole. You know the reference.
Yeah. So my dad was a minister. My grandfather was a minister on my mother's side. And my mother went to school for biology. And then she met my dad through university, and they got married. And she said, look, if we're going to have any kids, I hated my upbringing of just having to move every 2 years. Right. And just like she wanted to make things very different for my brother and myself. And so she made sure that my dad would find a church that he could stay at for our entire upbringing. And she also brought science into our lives. So we have both sides. We have both the science side and we have the church side as well. So
that's amazing.
I'm a lover of everything. And I don't begin to say that I have all the answers at all. I'm just, I love learning about everything. And that's who I am.
That's amazing. I love that. Yeah. So I think those are the experiences that I think kind of helped to shape who I was artistically. And like with the cheerleading too, it's like, I think the coolest thing about cheerleading is that you're not facing an audience by yourself. You have a team with you, right? And so I think that was one of the best experiences that I could have had, because it's still intimidating, but you have all of your friends there with you, and we're all facing, the same nerves at the same time. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. The cool thing with cheerleading is that, yes, you are part of a team, but every once in a while you get to stand out and sort of be like the star for like 10 seconds and then you move back.
And I think that was like the craziest thing for me, is not having any experience at all with cheer or with dance or anything, but my coaches telling me to come up front and center. And I think that was kind of my leg up, so to speak, at the time, because I remember there was a few times too where they'd be like, okay, guys, pause. Let's watch how Q does this dance sequence. And it would cause a little bit of contention sometimes with the girls on the team. But I think I had the leg up because it wasn't contrived. It was, I'm feeling the music. I'm dancing because I love the song. I'm passionate about it, and there's feelings coming through while I dance. And I think, those things were translated, and it was a really amazing experience. And I realized how much I loved it. And I think that's when that light bulb goes off, when it's like, wow, like I'm good at something, like I'm really good at this. Right.
So cool. So cool. So tell me, after winning the Bounce Showdown, how did your life change?
I would say that my life was very music centered after winning the Bounce Showdown. Yeah. Very music centered.
Did you keep going to the new high school in Edmonton? Okay.
I did. I did. And I think my family didn't necessarily change. My upbringing didn't change. My values didn't necessarily change at the time, like growing up in a Christian family or a Christian house, and like also South Asian predominantly with our traditions and cultural values. I wasn't really allowed to go to parties a lot. I wasn't really, out socializing too much. So I think it became something where music was something that I fixated on, and it was the only thing that I focused on and wanted to do because I didn't really have any other outlets at the time. Right. So that's all I did.
I'm so curious because of your South Asian and Jamaican background.
Ask away. Yeah.
I have to know, is it curry chicken or chicken curry?
Chicken curry, because I'm brown.
Okay.
South Asian. Yeah. I always I had a friend talk to me yesterday about, like, I guess they're Trini. And I was like, he was like, let's go to like this Trini place. And I was like, yeah, take me there so I can tell them their roti's fake. Different for me. In the Caribbean community, they call like Indian Caribbeans coolie. So technically I'm that, but because I'm like literally half South Asian and half Jamaican, it's like, it's chicken curry. Like they took it from the South Asians anyway. So
of course. Have you ever had doubles from Trinidad?
I think I've had doubles when I was really, really small. So like, because I'm not Trini, it's not something that I necessarily grew up having.
That's true.
It's funny food because it's just this like amalgamation of like Caribbean things and like South Asian things that you just like slap together.
Yeah, absolutely. What a great mix though, I mean, even just musically, what you were talking about, like just, did you find that, I mean, like soca is so amazing, Bhangra is so amazing. Did you ever find that these two worlds kind of like could come together? Do you ever feel like there's any similarities between these two styles of music at all? Or are they very different from each other?
I think there are similarities, but also I think that, one of the things that separates music in one genre, maybe from a next genre, is the culture behind it, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, if you look at Caribbean culture and musically and the culture in person, it's very laid back, it's very chill, it's very like lively, have a good time, be carefree, right? So, and then, like a lot of the Bhangra stuff, it's kind of the same thing, a lot of like party music, etc. But then you go to some of like the Hindi songs from Bollywood movies, for example, they're very love-based, very dramatic, right? So I think there's similarities, but I think, I like to appreciate the nuanced differences between each one as well.
I just love the joyousness of hearing like a massive soca tune.
Yeah.
I've been to Carnival in many different Caribbean nations.
Have you?
I have, yes. And just seeing like
where have you been?
all over the place, but just seeing like 100,000 people all jumping up and down to a really fast-paced soca song.
Kind of white guy ever, Rob, like the cultured white guy that knows the different things. Like you brought up doubles. This is amazing. Like
I've traveled, man. I've
pat yourself on the back, Mr. Wells. I need to see it. Yes, pat yourself on the back.
The world is an amazing place, and I highly recommend to everybody that you get out there and visit the world, because you'll learn so much about the world, and just you'll also learn that we're all the same. We're all the same. We all just want a good time in this world. Really, that's absolutely it. And just hearing soca music, to me, like I didn't know soca music back in the early 2000s, but then I got to know it in the 2010s, and just it's incredible, absolutely incredible.
I'm in such a good mood. But I'm a bit of a dance hall girl when it comes to the two. So
yeah. Absolutely. Does that music creep into your current sound at all? Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you listen to Come Through and New Ting, those are both pretty heavily Jamaican influenced. So I used island beats for those. And then because I came up in pop, I was able to use pop elements just with like my melodies and a little bit of the writing. But I do kind of use a patois dialect in and throughout the tracks. And also when I rap as well, I usually interweave a little bit of patois in there as well. And I think, again, like some of these things are just second nature, because when you grow up with it, it was like whenever there was heavy emotion too, like, you know, somebody is, even my mom would be like, when your parents are foreign, it's a thing that like all us kids know, they usually like get mad in a different language or like use different words. So it's like, I think in moments of passion for me, artistically, especially when I'm expressing myself, that also comes natural to me. So it's something that comes through and bleeds through my art as well.
I had another artist here on this podcast named Neva, and she's from Bulgaria, and she's lived also in England. And she said it all depends on her level of anger, or if she's had a drink or not, just depending on whether the English accent comes out or the Bulgarian accent comes out.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the things that make your art unique, right? Like if art is a reflection of reality, then that's exactly what's happening. It's a reflection of your identity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, you started rapping at some point. Tell me about that. Like, who were some of the rappers that you loved growing up? Who inspired you?
So growing up, I was a real hip hop head, but especially in my teens. So when I really started to study hip hop, I was a real hip hop head. I loved hip hop from the time I was small. I grew up on like the Fugees, Lauryn Hill. My uncle used to play Biggie, Nas, Jay-Z. I remember, you know, when 99 Problems came out, my uncle was so gung-ho, but it was everywhere. And it was just so interweaved in my everyday life that it just kind of became a part of me. So on my own accord, by the time YouTube became a thing, I would just go and like learn and look at, oh, like Busta Rhymes used to be in a rap group. That's crazy. Let's check this out. And I would just go and really just deep dive, and digging in the crates for me was digging throughout like YouTube, and all of it was pretty new. Like it was just kind of uploaded. So, and then obviously because I was in school early 2000s, we used to have BET. And my mom would be at work until 5, but then I'd get home at like 3:30. So I'd have like an hour window to like go on.
She didn't block. She didn't block it.
No, she didn't. So, it was like 106 in Park, and like Lil Wayne was just kind of coming up at the time with like the formula of mixtape after mixtape after mixtape. So that was huge. There was a lot of like the dance crazes, like Soulja Boy, Right Third, Chingy, and like crumping was a thing, and the dance movies, you know, like Stomp the Yard. So all of these things were really part of my journey growing up and my childhood and my teen years. So I think for me, my biggest influences, and especially growing up, were Nas, Notorious B.I.G., Lauryn Hill, and then I also will never forget the first time I heard Nicki Minaj. And obviously, like I liked Lil Kim and Foxy Brown because they're girls. But then again, like I was always a student of music, so researching it was like, oh, like Biggie wrote Kim's rhymes. Oh, Jay wrote Foxy's rhymes. So it was more just like, okay, so like study them. Like how did they put their rhymes together? So it was a lot of those artists, and, you know, Jay. And I think Lauryn was a huge inspiration to me because she didn't have guys writing her rhymes. And that was something that I really aspired to be. And she was also part of the Fugees. So when I used to watch her videos and check out her stuff, it was like, yo, she can actually kick it with the guys. But she also had like her own thing. She wasn't trying to be something that she wasn't. And it came off as very genuine. So I would say that was a huge inspiration as well. And then like, you know, DMX and those guys. Like I loved rap. I loved the culture of it. And I think being younger, and especially in my teen years, I think I had so much to say. I didn't know how to say it, but what I loved about hip hop was the array of different emotions you could go through. And I felt like I was missing out on that with singing. I felt like I couldn't always express what I wanted to say or how I was feeling to just sing. So I wanted to rap.
And when was the first time that you kind of put your foot down and said, you know, I'm going to put rap into my music? Enough of this pop nonsense. I'm going to actually do the stuff that I really, truly love and how I want to be seen in this world. When did you first start rapping?
So I always did. I started with rap. What I started to do, because I couldn't rap initially, was I would take hip hop beats. So like Tupac was a big influence as well. So I would take Tupac beats, and his beats were always like really melodic. There was a lot of piano and a lot of instrument. So I would take his beats and go like look up the instrumental and then write a song to a Tupac beat, for example, right? And then after that, it just became a very slow thing. So I would emulate people's raps and like rap them back. And then I think around the time right before I won the Juno, I had always had in my head that I'm going to learn to rap. I'm going to teach myself how to rap. And I just kind of started to slowly integrate that. I don't think there was any one moment. I think it was something that slowly happened. And my very first rap, it was always kind of like a melodic, like I'm kind of half singing, like too scared to really rap. And that's kind of how I started. And then when I moved to Toronto, there was an artist named Rich Kid. Shout out to Rich Kid. He's amazing. He was amazing. Like I went into the studio with him. I think I was like 18, 19. And I was like, I want to rap. So he was like, do you know how to count bars? And I was like, I don't know how to count bars. He's like, well, your rappers count bars. And my feelings were a little hurt, but I ended up learning to count bars because of this experience. And I got on my first rap track with him. And after that, it was like, okay, like this is something I can do, but there's a couple things I need to learn and teach myself and reach out to some people to learn. And so I really got immersed in rap, and I had a lot of friends that were rappers, and yeah, eventually it just became a thing. And I practiced a lot. I threw on instrumentals and I sat down with them and I freestyled and I put a pen in my mouth so I could like rap really, really fast and do double time. And I studied and I would look up other rappers' lyrics. And my biggest thing was like, how do I be lyrical? How do I say something that's impressive? How do I say something that's smart? So it took a lot of practice and a lot of observation. And I think from there on, I started listening to music differently. I started listening to rap and hip hop differently. I started listening to lyrics differently. And it was more of an analytical thing for me. And how can I take this and make it my own and make something really amazing out of this from my perspective? And how do I put my own voice to this? Right. So yeah, finding my voice was kind of the second step to that, but it was a slow catalyst.
Yeah, but part of finding your way though is imitating other artists, right?
Yeah.
And just learning what they're doing and doing exactly what they're doing, and then eventually you begin to find your own voice out of that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think some of the best artists are really great imitators. Like if you look at like a Doja Cat, Ariana Grande, like they're great at doing that. And I think for me, like that's totally how my art started as well. Like growing up biracial, it was like, again, it's that cherry picking luxury that we as mixed people have to be able to say like copy an accent, right? And that became very easy for me. I went to daycare as a kid too, and was exposed to a lot of Spanish because all of the daycare workers were Colombian, right? So I became like, I'm pretty sort of conversational even in Spanish just from those experiences. And like my brain just works like that. It loves language. It loves words. It loves just even if it's not English, right? So, and music, and even when it's foreign music. So I think it's just another kind of a mixed girl knack, if you will, where it's like, I like to imitate, I like to copy, whether it's rap music or even just funny stuff. Like, you know, me and my brother and my family, we would all kind of just sit and like crack jokes about like accents for hours sometimes. And yeah, all of it ended up being interweaved into my artistic identity.
So great. So great. What kind of subject matter do you cover in your raps?
It's different now, I would say. I think even that has evolved a lot. My subject matter used to be a lot of angry stuff, a lot of angry expressions, a lot of kind of hashing out or just like expressing how I felt about different people that I didn't feel like I could say to them in their face, right? Because even I think part of the biggest thing about growing up Canadian is you understand what it is to be socialized by a Western standard, but then like because your parents are not necessarily 100% Canadian or your family isn't, you've also been exposed to other ways of communicating that like are not normal to Western culture and society. So how do you expose how do you bridge that gap and then also say things or express things or talk about what you've seen or experienced or heard in a way that's socially acceptable? And I think that's what music and rap did for me, right? So initially that was kind of the subject matter. And just, I liked, what my biggest thing about rap that I loved was I could be more direct. I could just say it how it was, and I could be clever with it. I could be tongue in cheek. I could be angry if I wanted to. I could use bad words if I felt like it and be passionate about what I was saying. And I just felt like, in music, when you do have a pretty voice and it's pop and it's melodic, I didn't feel like I could do that. And I didn't feel like it was right artistically. Like I think there's a lot of people that make it work, but it's like, that's not what I want that to be. I think, even as all this talk about being a biracial person, I have so many parts to me as a person. Mm-hmm. And there are parts that I want to express in just that light, and I don't want to have to mix them all the time. Right. So yeah, rap for me is just that like blunt, direct, here's what I think, and this is what it is. And I don't care what your response is. This is who I am. And that's what it is. And singing for me is like almost my speaking voice. It's who I am when I'm trying to be intimate or be sweet or be understood. Even like rap for me isn't necessary. There's an element of being understood, I think, for artists in all the work that we do, but it's like, it's just going about it in a different way. So
do you find that the raps that you're writing, they're coming from a deeply personal place and it's things that you've gone through, but do you find that your listeners are also getting into this as well? And you're kind of telling their story as well, or things that they've gone through?
Yes. So I found that a lot. There was a time as well, a couple of years ago, when I was doing in 2016, when I left Toronto and was independent, I began doing freestyles online. And that was kind of how I got a big, rap, a lot of support for my rap style of music was social media. And I remember there was a time when like people would it was freestyles. It wasn't even songs. It was just stuff I was like rapping online, and people would like finish my sentences if I put it in a rap from that week in my caption, and people would just like come back and like finish it. And I remember it happened one day where like 6 people did it. And I was like, that's crazy. People are actually listening to my raps and they rock with it. So I think there's been a lot of different tracks that I've put out. Sometimes I'll like take things off because sometimes things are not always haven't always been the quality in the past that I wanted. So I'll, archive a song or two, but there's been a lot of different situations where people will reach out to me and just say like, hey, like this is something that I was going through. I love this track. This line hit me hard. So yeah, like I think I love it because it's just another tool to pull out of my bag to be able to relate to other people and connect with them. And I think, kind of like I said, I wasn't always the most socially connected growing up. And as an artist now, that's still something that I pursue. And that's probably one of the center stone pieces of my artistry now, is to connect and I think everybody's just trying to belong and get in where they fit in and be heard and be understood. So
mm-hmm. I love that hip hop and rap has permeated the world. And I think for a very good reason. When I was growing up in high school, rap was like a serious no-no. I would do talent shows, and there was a good friend of mine, Jim Dunford. We got together and we did a rap for a talent show, and we got booed off the stage. But I'm so thankful that rap, like we're talking like early 80s when this happened, but rap has totally taken over the world. Hip hop has taken over the world to the point that it's in almost every music genre now.
Everything.
And the reason why I think is because it gives such honesty and just like it doesn't give a sugar-coated view of the world. It's like, here's what's really happening. Here's what I'm going through. And I think that's what people are thirsting for. They're searching for stuff that is real, that feels, like the real struggle stories that are out there. And people love to hear stuff like that.
They do. And it is authentic. I do think that there's some drawbacks, maybe that's another conversation. I don't know. But I think, when we look at what culture is and has become, again, like it's kind of just back to that messaging of like, what impact is this actually having? What impact is it having on me? What impact is it having on my audience? So one of the things for me that I said, I kind of mentioned this when you asked my subject matter, that's what it was. And now what it is like, I tried to say things from a bit of a different place and like an explanatory place now and from a healed place. And I noticed that as I do heal and as I do grow and as I mature, my subject matter in rap does change. And even kind of what I listen to and what I'm drawn to, music wise and rap wise, is very different. And there's some things that I now like don't really support anymore. And I find it a little bit obnoxious and unnecessary. I think we're in a time now, as great as it is that rap has permeated culture, I think, especially as racialized people, as Black people, post BLM, we can't talk about positive change and not be accountable to the art that we're making and the messages that we're sending, and whether or not we're also perpetuating stereotypes, because I think those are also conversations that need to be had within our communities as well, because they are and can be harmful. And because it's so mainstream, like, what message are you sending? It's a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah, I think that as artists, as producers, as songwriters, we have a responsibility to help out the world as much as we can. How has your music changed then over the years? Like what are you writing now? What sort of subject matters are you putting into your music?
So for the past 3 years, I haven't actually wrote anything, which is funny because now over the past 2 months, I think I've started writing again. And I think for me, it's just, I needed a reset. I needed kind of just start creating the same things out of like the same emotions. And I was feeling really stuck personally and artistically. And music became somewhat unfulfilling and not fun anymore, obligatory. It became a bit of a job, and I really wasn't happy at all. And I think I was creating out of that place, and it was not fun. So I went back to church. I read my whole Bible back to front. I watched a lot of sermons. I did a lot of therapy, and just did a lot of soul searching. I did nothing for 3 years. I worked a job and I kind of just chilled. And I think now, like, that was probably one of the best things I could have done, because what I'm creating out of now is like a renewed perspective of like, okay, here was my experience. This is what I learned from it. And, life is lived forward, but sometimes it makes sense backward. And sometimes when you're in it, and if you stay in it and you never really pause, or you don't ever take the time to reflect, or to learn some of the lessons, to be self-aware, I think it's hard to create something new. And I think it's easy to get stuck and start to repeat patterns, even if they're negative or toxic. So now I'm creating from a place of commitment to my health and commitment to holistic health, mental health, spiritual health, artistic health, even. And relationships are a big part of that too, right? Like whatever. I think somebody said something to me the other day, and I don't know if I'm going to butcher what she said, but it was great. It was because how somebody does anything is how somebody does everything, right? And I think what she meant by that is, if your car is a mess, then your life is probably a mess. Your relationships are probably a mess. Your mind is probably a mess. And so for me, now that I've been committed to my own personal health and mental health and spiritual well-being and just being healthy as a person, eating, going to the gym, I think my music is a lot healthier too. And I think it's reflecting that. So I think even if it's, this is a hurtful situation that I'm writing about or talking about, it's also in the context of, how can it still be healthy? And how am I learning from it? It's not just like all negativity. It's like, okay, here's the perspective. Here's where we want to go. There has to be a solution here. Whereas, I think in the past and when you're younger, there was no solution. It was just, I'm just mad. So I'm just making a song that's all mad. And I don't think that was healthy for me or anybody else.
Yeah, there are some songs that are out there where they kind of just say, isn't the world a terrible place? And there's no solution in there. And I love the songs where it sort of tells you, there is actually probably a way to make this a little bit better.
And it may be that you don't know it, but there is one. And I think, again, like, that's all part of growing. And I try to be empathetic and compassionate because I have been that artist. I've been that person, right? But we're all growing through our journeys. We're all at different places. And I think, there's a time, I think, when as young people, we go through things for the first time. And because you're going through it for the first time, it feels like the world is ending and everything, there is no solution. It's just life is done and finishing. But I think, again, part of maturing and learning and growing in life is like, okay, well, maybe there is a solution for every problem. Because every time I thought the world was ending, it didn't actually end. So maybe there's room for a perspective shift here. And I think, that's the healthiest thing I could have done, was taking a step back and the hustle culture that we live in, and especially with the way that music is manufactured, even in hip hop, it's this like quantity, 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 not necessarily quality. And I think, honestly, in my experience as an artist and interacting with other artists, I think sometimes we get so caught up in our talents and our skills and our gifts, and we don't actually, our personal development gets stunted as a result. And as much as we are so emotional as artists, we can write the most emotional songs that can connect to anybody and everybody. But I find that myself, at the time and throughout different times, and even some of my artistic peers that I've met and interacted with, they become stuck in this like one emotional, phase of their life. And I think it's so important as artists to actually grow through and prioritize personal development, because I don't think it happens enough with us. And, writing a hit song about heartbreak and being a hopeless romantic when you're like 20 to 25 is really cute. But then when you're like 35, and this is like a real thing that I'm seeing a bit of a pattern of, 35, 40-year-old artists, and like you're still that and you haven't grown past that person, it's not cute anymore. And I think we need to really start looking ahead and like, what is the trajectory and the long-term effects or impacts on these, and how have I grown? I think these are very important questions to ask, especially in the context of like narcissism. And I think that has even become cultural, because people glorify us as artists and they glorify our gifts, right? And I think we need to start asking the important questions and asking artists those important questions, and like holding them accountable as well, because like responsibility is a big thing. Accountability is something that I'm increasingly becoming aware of. And I think that's something that my attention has been drawn to more than ever.
I love that you took a serious break from this in order to figure things out. I mean, I love that thing where it says the best thing for a forest is a forest fire, and just like let it go down to the ground and let it all start again. Let it reorganize itself and just be the healthiest forest that can ever grow out of this. Maybe before that forest was all tangled up with weeds and there's like nothing was making sense. And then all of a sudden you just get something traumatic like that, where you just like stop everything and then let it start growing again in the most beautiful way.
And I think that's like the scariest thing too, because as an artist, it's like, you don't want to ever quit. You never want to give up. I put my whole life into this. I've been doing this since I was a kid professionally. And then like before that, just like, I always loved music. So it's like, does that mean that I can never do this again? What does that mean? Like, what's going to happen? And like, it's that embracing the unknown. But honestly, it was the best thing I could have ever done. And sometimes you need that. And as a big advocate for faith, I think, even though you don't always control everything, there is still an author that is in control. And I think, that's something that can be trusted. And when it's necessary, it's necessary. And it's honestly the best thing I've done probably for my music and for me personally to date, is taking a break.
Amazing. So can you tell me a little bit about the new music that you're making? When would we be hearing something new, or is it a different shift in style?
A little bit. I'm currently starting with features. So I'm doing a lot of features right now with a lot of rappers. And that's kind of how I'm getting back into it. And I have a lot to say, just because I haven't said anything for 3 years. I've learned a lot. I've seen a lot. And so over the next couple of weeks, hopefully you'll be having things. It's like hard to say, because when you're featuring on other people's songs, it's like, hey, when are you dropping this? My job is just to write it and go record it and send it back and make sure the mix is good. But yeah, so hopefully in the next couple of weeks, you guys will be hearing me on other tracks. And again, like with this renewed outlook that I have, one of the biggest things that I never did before was collaboration. I was really stunted in that area. And, I didn't realize that I'm an introvert naturally. I'm a functional extrovert. So I think people get me mixed up. But as an introvert and as somebody who just like didn't necessarily know how to socialize because I grew up super sheltered, I think that's like my biggest thing now is like, how do you pursue community? How do you get involved with other artists and get involved with like-minded people? And, that's kind of how I'm starting out. It's just like, okay, cool. Like, what do I actually like? And I don't want to just get back into it and like, okay, I'm going to make all of these songs about me, for me. Nah, it's like I'm going out, I'm following different people on social media. I'm interacting with a bunch of different artists. I'm encouraging other people because I just got out of a season where I encouraged myself and people encouraged me. And I'm seeing what I like. And every time I catch something I like, I'm like, hey, send me this. Hey, send me this. And it's like, it's funny because the way that it's come back to me, it's like I'm writing a whole verse in like an hour or less. And I'm thinking like, I haven't even done this in 3 years, but you know what? Like it's in me. This is what I've always done. This is what I know. And it's actually going faster because I took that break and because I have a solid foundation to build off of. So I'm just starting by mingling and talking with other artists, building community, getting reintegrated, socializing, working on my relationships, personally, artistically, professionally, and collaborating with other people and seeing what I can add to their stuff. And that's kind of my priority right now.
Oh, that's so great. Are your collaborators, are they local? Are they worldwide? How's that working?
So worldwide, but I've started pretty local. So Calgary, Edmonton. And it's funny because going back on Instagram, like I pretty much deactivated my account for the majority of the past 3 years. So coming back now, it's like people are gravitating to me. So there's a couple tracks that I've seen and I've reached out. I'm like, hey, send me this. But then also there's a lot of people who are just like, hey, are you doing features? Or they'll find me. And obviously that's just because I'm, people know of me. People, I guess, are like, hey, have you heard of Q? So they just reach out and they're like, hey, are you doing features? I'm like, yeah, actually I am. So that happened twice this past week and they happen to be Edmonton artists. And one of them has a pretty big following. And like, it's like different races of artists too. And like, that's what I love. So internationally, I'm willing to do, but because I literally just activated my account like 2 months ago, it's like I'm getting my feet wet, but locally is kind of where the buzz is at right now, just because people are gravitating to me. So yeah, whoever reaches out in the next little bit is kind of where I'm going to see where I can add value.
That's
and it's
awesome.
fun. It's really fun. I think like I regret not doing this sooner. I don't know why it just like wasn't something that occurred to me. And I think that's why music got so cumbersome is because I was doing everything by myself. I was isolating myself. I was trying to just create and make this like, this has to work. This has to work. But the magic happens sometimes with collaborations. And I'm really excited about this next chapter of music for me.
That's amazing. I love that. It is shocking how musical and how musically diverse Alberta is. A lot of people would just think that Alberta is just like straight up country, but it's not. I've gone to like music events in Edmonton and Calgary and everything is there and it's all top notch. It's great musicality in that province.
Yeah, I think like I would say that, but like I'm gonna also keep it real because I like, started making music at a professional level. Like sometimes it's not top notch and that's okay because, and like, that's just, I think the accessibility is something that we need a little bit more of in Alberta, right? Like we talk about gatekeeping in context of racialized people often, and like people would say when BLM became a big thing, it was like the white gatekeepers. But I think now one of the patterns I'm noticing is like some of those gatekeepers are racialized. And I don't know if that's always better because again, as artists, when your personal development is stunted and you come from marginalized communities where like a lot of this mental health stuff or socializing stuff isn't talked about, I don't know if that's always the healthiest thing, right? So, and like narcissism can be cultural as well. That's something that I've recently learned. I didn't know that. And collective. So I think these are all things that like, being in and around kind of the artistic community in Calgary is like, okay, so how do you help in that regard? And I think like, again, for me, it's being the change. And like, when I see something that's problematic, it's like, there's one side to that where you can criticize it and be critical of it. And I think as artists, we're really good at that. But then because I am an artist and I like to create, it's like, how can I create a solution to this? Right. And so I think that's partly what I'm doing right now is how do I see things that I like and be an influencer in the music community and be able to draw light and draw attention to some of the things that I like, because it's not always about like, let's criticize this person or that person or what they're doing. It's like, no, what are you doing to shed light on the things you like instead of talk about what you don't like? And so all that to be said, Alberta's great. I think the people are really great. I love Edmonton. It's where I'm from, and I know a lot of the people there. They're very welcoming. That's where I got my start. People are very open to collaborations in Edmonton and Calgary too. But there's also stark social differences in the artistic communities with both. And so, you work with who you work with. And I think sometimes, having grace as well, because I was one of the artists who did find it really difficult to kind of socialize with other artists initially as well. So yeah, I think again, you don't see a lot of girls in this space doing big things. And so I think this next chapter, it's not about me. It's about how I can serve with my gifts and talents while also utilizing music and doing that and make that part of my purpose, so to speak, or my calling, so to speak, but also how do I make community part of that? And I do see myself as a leader. And if I think I can do things better than a lot of men that I see doing them, it's they learn from the best, take notes, and lead with compassion, love, and talent and good music. So I support the things that I like, and I support the things that are also top notch too. And I think again, how do you create the bar? How do you create a standard? How do you raise the standard, right? Because it's easy to grow up in the industry, and now I know things. I know how to make a great mix. I know how to do great vocals, but it's how do you benefit other people with that knowledge as well? I'm here for a reason. So.
Oh yeah. Amen to that. So tell me, what would you say to the next generation of females, or those identifying as female, that want to be in this industry, that want to be in your shoes, that want to be doing exactly what you're doing, or something else in the music industry? What would you say to them? A little bit of advice for their beginning of their journey.
I would say, 1, everything that glitters isn't gold. 2, if I had to choose, probably early on, and if I saw the journey of mine before embarking on it, I wouldn't have embarked on it. I would have been doing just probably regular people things. And I think the piece of advice I would give is probably really different from a lot of other people's advice. I think my perspective now on what it is if you don't have anything of value to add, and your heart posture is not of serving other people, and I guess love. And what I mean is how do you benefit other people, and how are you committed to healing yourself and being healthy? I would say I don't think it's necessary. I think we're in a time and a day and age where there's hundreds of influencers, there's hundreds of artists. Artists are a dime a dozen, but I think coming up in this industry, one of the questions that I would always get asked is what makes you different? And I think that's something that really permeated my psyche for the negative, right? But realistically, I think what makes you different is sometimes you don't even have that answer until you've lived a little bit of life. And I would just encourage people to live life to really solidify their values and what they appreciate out of the world and out of people. And that is what it is to be an artist. It's how do you see the world? How do you feel things? What do you appreciate from yourself, from other people, from family? What is love to you? And I think that is what it means to be an artist. It's not just writing a dope song. It's not just performing. It's not just creating. It's being. The disposition of an artist is being. So I would really just say become an artist first before creating art. And I think, this industry, it doesn't really need additional people to just come in and create random stuff, because a lot of people I've been doing this for a long time. People are here today and gone tomorrow. And, it's good to also try things, but I don't know. I think just be a healthy person. That's what we're on earth for. There's 7 billion people in the world, and there's a million ways that you can serve through that. And what are your gifts, skills, and talents? Focus on those. And the reason that you're put here, seek truth, whatever that looks like for you. For me, it's God. It was the Bible. And that's where I really found a foundation for myself. And I think more people need to, be self-aware in that context. And like, if you're not, seek it. We don't need more confusion being created, because I think we're all really confused and we're all just looking to find truth. And not until you find who you are as a person and artistically, and some level of solutions and positivity or positive perspective, so to speak, or you've learned something and have a story, I think that would be the most impactful time to be an artist, because it's only just now for me that I feel like I'm scratching the surface of who I am and even what my gifts, talents, and skills are. As much as a lot of people might beg to differ, or it looks like something on the outside, I don't think so. I think I'm only just now about to scratch the surface of what I've meant for. And that came from, over 10 years in the music industry, a lot of experiences, personal and otherwise, some nightmares, some trauma, some really great experiences and triumphs. But I'm able now to create from there, and being committed to health, go forward. So honestly, I would just say, it's unnecessary. Like, I wouldn't envy the position I'm in now. Rob, one of the questions, and I'm sorry to kind of go on, I think it's a really great question, because people do often ask you questions like this. And I think in 2020, over COVID, one of the questions I asked myself is, if this rap thing works out for you, who are 3 female rappers that are on top right now? And that would be your best case scenario. So I thought of, and I'm not going to name any names because I don't believe in that, but I thought of 3 female rappers at the time in 2020 who were at the top of their game and everywhere and super successful. And my thought was, okay, my next thought was, would you trade places with any of them? Would you genuinely want to trade places with any of them? And I looked at like what the tabloids were saying. One of them had a lawsuit. One of them was being cheated on by their then husband, I think. And the other one just didn't seem happy. She had like drama on social media. And I thought, like, no, I really don't want to trade. I wouldn't want to trade places. They don't seem like happy people. They don't seem like they're enjoying themselves. Like, this person was just crying on IG Live, the last one I watched. So it's like, again, we don't talk enough about the reality of what this is. And I don't think, people glorify a platform and gifts, talents, and skills, but I think that there's so much more. I think we need to glorify health and happiness and people who care about people, compassion, nurturing, empathy. And, when I realized that, and I realized, like, I wouldn't want to trade places with any of those 3 artists, and that's actually the path that I'm on or trying to pursue, why am I pursuing this path if I wouldn't want to trade places with them? So that was like a huge epiphany for me. And I just was like, okay, so I got to do something else, or I have to figure out what direction I want to go in, or like pave a path for myself. And so I think I would just really encourage people to see things from the other side of the coin, and like, look at your favorite artists, go do research about them genuinely, not like the technical things, like, oh, how did they start? How did they this? If you look at the commonalities that we artists have, especially females, it's a lot of trauma, and it's a lot of like unhealed things that we start creating out of. We don't necessarily create because it's like, well, this is so much fun. We're creating because we need to express. There's things that we are breaking, and there's holes, and there's things that need to get out. And I think that's something that we really need to pay attention to, right? And especially with the conversations about mental health now, and the conversations about marginalized communities and race, there are things that we really do need to watch and take care of and heal within our communities and cultures. And why are artists? Like, a lot of the time it is pain that fuels that. So it's like, you can't just like live out of that place, right? So I would just say, like, live your life. Like, not everybody needs to be famous. And to be honest with you, I don't even believe in being an artist unless you genuinely feel like this is your destiny. Because, and again, like, I'm big on faith. I think I heard somebody say in a sermon the other day, or an interview, I think they said something like, I don't want to embark on a hard that God hasn't called me to, because at that point, how do you know that you're supposed to be on that path? How do you know that it's amounting to anything? Right. So it's hard. It's not fun. It's not always fun. And there's a lot that you have to go through, and a lot of sacrifices often too that are made. And sometimes those sacrifices are things that you do care about. And it's time with your family and loved ones and relationships. And I would just encourage people to look at those effects. Like, there's studies out there, and impacts on mental health. There's stories about a lot of these artists that you know and love. Even some of the bigger art actresses, they have their stories out there for people to, some of them have written memoirs. Go see what their experiences are and ask yourself if it's worth it. And honestly, like, a lot of times it's like not. Why? So you can have some followers and be famous, you know? I don't know. Again, like, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul, right? And soul for me is defined as your mind, will, and your emotions. If you're not even yourself by the time you get there, why do you want to go there? Right? Who are you as a person? And I think that's the best advice I could give. I don't think everybody needs to be an artist, you know? And if I didn't feel like this was my destiny and I was destined for this and made for this, I would not be here either. Accomplishments included. I wouldn't. I would have just dropped it and quit because my health and my happiness comes first.
That is one of the best answers I've ever heard.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It might be controversial. I know it's not very popular, but again, like, that's where I've been for the past 3 years, is grappling with, like, what do I do with my life? Why have I been doing this? Is it worth it? You know, and returning to it gave me a renewed outlook. And that's what that is. I mean, like, I really wouldn't be here if I didn't feel like I was destined for it, and that everything that I started with, and even just my start, like, it was kind of an accident. And, you know, it was a divine accident, I think. And, you know, I have to make sure that all of the experiences that I've been through amount to something positive for the amount of negative that I've put out, and also kind of just lived through and been around. So, like, I'm determined to make the next half of my career look different. And the hard is going to be worth it, because I'm making sure that it ends up positively.
I feel almost like this is the beginning of your career.
Thank you. I know. Thank you. I feel the same.
I feel like what happened before is just like one thing. And this is the real you that's now coming out.
100%. And I feel that way. And again, like, it's a different situation, because, like, I did start music as, like, younger, and some of the people that I even look at, and, you know, some of them do, like, it's a really sad thing, because as an artist, like, I reflect on, like, okay, like, what has happened to past artists before me who did have similar come ups, even, like, as kids. Like, you look at their stories, sometimes it is traumatic. Sometimes it's super sad. Sometimes people have died or, you know, died by suicide, or they've been hooked on drugs or substance abuse. And, like, I've definitely had my seasons with so many different things of, like, you know, trying to cope with different things in this industry. But, like, again, a lot of us artists face a lot of trauma, and that's why we become artists. So it's like, at one point, and I don't think anybody's necessarily, like, their destiny or their calling is I'm just meant to be an artist. I'm meant to be an influencer. I'm just meant to be famous. Like, I don't believe in that. I think you have unique skills, gifts, talents to be able to serve the world in a capacity. But that also only comes from a healed perspective, because you can't pour out of an empty cup, right? So different. I'm definitely in a different headspace, and I'm not. The most important thing in life isn't what I do. My identity isn't in what I do. And I think rooting in that made me negative. It made me competitive. It made me compete with people, even in my head. And why I wouldn't work with other artists is because it was like, I can't share what I have because it's mine. And then if they take it, then they're going to be the greatest. And it was, again, that, like, the thing that labels and managers used to always say to me of, like, you know, well, what makes you different? And it was just like, it was very, very, very unhealthy, especially for a girl, like a young, impressionable girl. And like, I don't wish that on anybody. I don't think that that's not, we're all human beings. There's more things that connect us in this world than there are things that make us different. How do you collaborate? And I think in this space, especially in rap, it is kind of like, it is rooted in some level of narcissism and cultural narcissism. And anybody who says that it's not, like, is lying, So like, it's a time now to talk about change. It's a time now to be the change. It's a time to work on personal development and to develop yourself and to be able to help others do the same. And I think if you haven't done that yourself, you're not in a position to help other people, right? And that's what it is to me to be an artist. But more so, like I said, I see myself as a leader. And I think artistry is one facet of that. And my identity is not in my music. It's in the person that I am, what I believe in, my values. And that's what I'm creating out of now. And that's where my endeavors are going to come from. That's the foundation from which my endeavors will now come. And it's not all music anymore. And like, I think it's limiting to just think that me as a person put on this earth I'm only meant to make music. I think we limit ourselves and put ourselves in a box often. And I don't think that that's necessary for me anymore.
Man, this has been a very, very inspiring talk. I'm
thanks so much. Thank you.
Super inspired. I'm going to wrap things up right there. We could go on for hours, I'm sure.
Well, I'm such a chatty Cathy. I'm sorry.
No, please don't apologize. I've loved every single moment of this. This is great. This is so good. I'm so happy that this happened and that you and I got to meet each other finally and have a conversation. I'm bummed out that you no longer live in Toronto, so that we can't go hang out or write face to face. But
totally, I'm planning a trip there soon, hopefully. So when I do, I will. I'll reach out, and me, you, and Shoba can hang out, go for coffee, go for lunch, something.
Be amazing. I would love that. Maybe we could write something.
Yes, maybe let's write something. So I'm definitely down to come out there. I have a flexible schedule over the next little bit here. So I'm pretty committed to coming out to Toronto for longer stints now. So yeah.
Okay. It gives me another reason to come out to Calgary again. I love that location.
Come out next time when there's like I would say stampede, but it gets a little busy. So, like the mountains are great, but if there's ever like a really good country concert or something.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Q, listen, from the bottom of my heart, I'm so happy that we did this, and thank you for taking the time. I know your schedule is pretty crazy, but I appreciate you taking the time and being here and being a part of this and inspiring the next generation of females coming up that wants to be in your shoes and wanting to be in this industry. And there's been some very, very wise words that have been said here over this past little while. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Amazing. You're absolutely welcome. I'd love to have you back sometime as well. We'll do a part 2.
Back. Let's do that. I think we need one.
Yeah, definitely.
Conversation. Thank you so much.
Okay, Q. Take care.
You too.
Stay tuned for the next episode of Women in the Music Industry, coming soon. Let's embark on this incredible journey together, celebrating the women who are reshaping the music business one note at a time. If you enjoyed hearing this podcast, please take a moment and give it a like, a rating, or a follow. Your support helps immensely. We'll see you next time.